Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and with me, as always, is my co host, Danny Gillette of HuskerBigRed.com. And we're here to talk some Nebraska football, some basketball, and everything else that has to do with the Huskers. So it's the day after Easter, and how's everything going for you, Danny?
Full, and I managed to get rid of my hangover in time for right now, so that's good.
That's good, and yeah, that's a solid start. It's yeah, Monday morning, and you could say that I guess Nebraska maybe has a little bit of a hangover on the recruiting trail because things haven't really been going that well just in the past week. I mean, it's too early to press the panic button or anything, but a number of targets that were on campus, for the March 25th visit weekend have now committed elsewhere, including two over the weekend. Thomas Heiberger, the linebacker. Gage Ginther's now committed to Tennessee, and of course Andrew Sprague committed to Michigan. So those were a couple of hits, a couple of top targets off the board. Dylan Raiola's trending in the wrong direction. Isaiah McMorris has gotten two crystal balls to Oklahoma. Davon Hall's now gotten a crystal ball projection to Penn State. So what's going on with Nebraska football recruiting right now?
You're asking kids to take a shot in the dark at a program that, you don't know what's going to happen as opposed to proven programs like Penn State, Oklahoma. I mean, even Tennessee last year had a great year. So, I mean, although we want to land these kids and although we want, to get the best in-state class possible, there needs to be results first. And I think we can still have a really good class if we don't land these guys. I mean, it seems like we're building a, stronghold in the state of Texas, and I just think that for a lot of these kids, you know, they don't want to go to Nebraska. And it's not just they don't want to go to the program, but a lot of them, don't want to stay home for college either. There's that aspect of it too. A lot of them want to, try out new areas and go new places. So, while I would want to land all of these players, I'm not expecting to. And, until we start, putting results on the football field, I mean, I would expect more of the same. And that's okay because, like I said, you're asking kids to take a shot in the dark for a program where we don't even know what it's going to look like yet. I think after year one, everybody will have a better idea of, how things are going to go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do think sure that is part of it. I mean, I'm wondering, what, maybe they need to, structure that visit weekend differently. I'm not sure. It's just looking back on it right now, we talked a lot about that visit weekend and it doesn't look like it was successful at all. I mean, Dylan Raiola hasn't trended in the right direction. Carter Nelson's been touring the SEC. I mean, it's just, they did get the commitment of Gibson Pyle. There hasn't been much, talk about much else. Mario Buford's been trending in the right direction, so it's not all negative news. But for the most part, it just seems like it's been a run of kind of negative hits for Nebraska this week. Which some of these things can still turn around. Just because guys got crystal balls doesn't mean that they're going to commit. But I guess just the thing that surprised me was like Gage Ginther had talked about coming back. It seemed like he was going to come back for another visit, and then boom, he's committed elsewhere. So just I don't know. It seemed like that visit weekend was a missed opportunity for the Huskers.
I don't know, 26 kids at one time for one visit weekend is a lot of kids. And I think maybe, some kids may have gotten lost in the shuffle just because there was so many players to reach out to and so many players to, come visit and see the campus. And I think it was a good idea for a lot of the big names to come and see the campus. But when it comes down to actually recruiting them and pursuing them at a high level, maybe, a smaller visit weekend or a one-on-one visit would have served better as it comes closer to decision time. And, I think, you live and you learn. And I still don't think it was a bad idea. You know what I mean? I think it's good that we got all those recruits to the campus. But, I think right now everybody's just playing the waiting game in terms of, what this program is going to look like moving forward. And I tweeted this on Saturday. I mean, I think there's a very good chance that Nebraska may be able to build a better pipeline in the state of Texas than the state of Nebraska, at least for the first few years.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope not. I mean, they need to get it's good. It's not going to be a good look for Matt Rule
No.
if they miss on the top four kids in this class. I mean, I don't there's a number of good players and you need to get those guys. And
What if
I
they
under
miss and they win?
yeah, but I mean, you still need to
Yeah.
get the recruits in this class. That's my opinion. I mean, the top guys. I mean, Texas, it is nice to have the Texas pipeline, but they're also not getting the top. They're not getting the top ranked guys out of Texas. So I mean, I don't know if that's going to be enough talent to, sustain things going forward. I mean, I do think Nebraska's going to have to hit in the transfer portal, but when you get good players in the state of Nebraska, like like Carter Nelson is going to be an NFL player, and you've got to get him. Like there's no excuse not to make it happen, and that's just my feeling on it. And I think, there's still a lot of time in this 2024 class, but I'm definitely concerned about in-state recruiting for sure. And I think there's reason to worry about each of the top six, recruits in the class right now. And I do think that is concerning moving forward.
If this was year 2 and this was happening, I'd be a little bit more concerned. Right now, I'm not as concerned because again, like we all have visions about what wants to happen, and we all want these kids to commit here, but nobody knows. Like I just said, nobody knows what it's going to look like. So, as long as we build a solid base and we continue to recruit at a high level, at this point, I don't care what state it's in. Right now, we just need wins. Right now, we just need wins, and then I think everything else will follow. I do think it's important to land the top kids in the class, but there's nothing to point to and say, "Oh, I can fit in that offense," because we haven't seen it live. There's nothing to point to where we could say, "Oh, I wouldn't be a good fit here." There's really just nothing to go off of that could sway recruits in one direction or another in favor of Nebraska in comparison to some of these bigger schools. Even in terms of development on the offensive line, has been a calling card for this coaching staff, but you know, we just haven't seen anything yet in terms of, oh, this guy went to the NFL under Matt Rule at Nebraska. Like, there's just too many unknowns and too many, I don't want to say sure things, but too many right trends for other schools right now.
Yeah, and I do agree with some of that. I mean, I think that some of that is part of going on, but also I think, like if you look at, I mean, with Daniel Kalen, I mean, obviously the decision to, put all the eggs in the Dylan Raiola basket maybe is going to be one that bites Nebraska at the end of the day. I mean, unless you can turn around and flip Dante Reno, which isn't, I don't think is going to be an easy thing to do. And then, if you miss on Raiola, then you're sitting there with a guy that I think wanted to go. I think if Nebraska recruited him as their top target, I think he would be committed to Nebraska right now. So, I mean, I just think that that's one instance where I'm not criticizing, I mean, obviously you got to run that race with Dylan Raiola, but maybe they could have tried to do it in a way to, keep Daniel Kalen there a little bit more. I'm not exactly sure, but that's just, maybe down the road if, Raiola commits to Georgia and then, you're not able to get a quarterback in 2024. I mean, that might be a decision you look back on and say, maybe that wasn't the best. I mean, I understand it, but I just think those are things that they need to reevaluate. And look, it's an ongoing process. And I've always said, I do think that Nebraska is going to have to be a transfer portal program because I don't know that it's ever going to be, a class that, I never bought into the idea that this was going to be like a top 10 class.
No, and I'm honestly fine with it being a transfer portal program as long as there's wins. I mean, you look at, Sonny Dykes at TCU, he's able to turn the program around quickly. I mean, you look at, Michigan State from a couple of years ago, they were able to turn the program around quickly. So I'm fine with it being a transfer, portal type of thing as long as there's wins attached to it because I do think you can build stability off of that based on winning results. Everything looks better when you win, and you know, I think the coaching staff is in place, and this is actually something I wanted to get to really quickly. It was interesting to hear, Gibson Pyle in our interview on Saturday talk so highly about, Donovan Raiola and his demeanor in terms of intensity during the practices and then just calmness, I guess, on game day. I mean, I think, a lot of fans are kind of what's the word I want to use? Kind of wary about Donovan Raiola this season, but I think he does resonate with recruits. So it was just interesting to hear that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, he has a big job on his plate, obviously, but Matt Rule seems to be buying, into the offensive line, and we'll see. He needs to get the best out of, Bryce Benhart and all these other guys. So, otherwise, it's going to be tough to, if the offensive line plays like it did last year, it's going to be tough to, win a whole lot more games. I still think Matt Rule can get there, but he keeps talking up this line like it's, he's saying it's one of the better groups that he's coached and, all this different stuff. So I don't know. Well, I don't know if that's him just blowing smoke. I guess we'll get a better glimpse of that, during the spring game. But I do think, a big part of it, I mean, is as we've talked about numerous times, I mean, Bryce Benhart was a 4-star recruit. I mean, these guys were, most of these guys on the offensive line were fairly highly recruited and talented guys. And, that's been the case with Nebraska for the past few years, like getting off the bus. Nebraska looks like, probably the most talented team in the Big Ten West. They just need to play like it now. And that's the job of Matt Rule and guys like Donovan Raiola.
Well, he called Bryce Benhart an NFL caliber player, and I kind of chuckled, to be honest with you. But maybe he sees something that we don't. And I also think, you had Greg Austin, where there was good, or not good, but decent line play in 2020. I think it was 2021. They completely fell apart, and then 2022, Raiola's first year, and you had an offensive coordinator who didn't do the offensive line any favors by constantly pass blocking. The offense didn't play to the strengths of the line, and the line was terrible. I'm not saying they were, Alabama type line, but there was just so much dysfunction. But now I feel like there's a little more cohesion. You talked about Marcus Satterfield's physical offense, and Gibson talked about it on Saturday and how he likes, that physicality. And, I just think there's going to be more cohesion between, for example, Satterfield and Barthel and Rayola. Like, I do think, this coaching staff will be able to work, together instead of like last year when each coach seemed to have a different agenda.
And just not Mark Whipple just was not committed to
Yeah.
the run. I mean, Anthony Grant would start. I mean, I remember like the Illinois game is one that sticks out, or
Yeah, I was just thinking that, yeah.
maybe it
And
was Minnesota, but there was one of those where
both.
they came out and just were pounding the rock, and then they just completely abandoned it. And so, I as an offense, I played offensive line, and it is easier to run block, and so it just I didn't feel like that they played to the strengths. I'm still worried about the tackle positions for sure. I feel pretty good about the interior. Because I like Piper and I like Latowski. I haven't seen Ben Scott play, but I mean, by all accounts, he's done pretty well. So I feel like there's a lot of depth, and there's some guys on the interior that could start. But at tackle, man, it's like I'm worried because if Corcoran has to go back out there, or if Ben Hart doesn't play well, or if Teddy, isn't 100%, if just one of those things doesn't go right, then Nebraska's in a world of hurt at the tackle position, unless one of these freshmen or one of these younger guys can really, step up, which is possible. I mean, that's what, college football is all about, but, we haven't seen that happen yet. So that's my biggest concern. That's why I'm still holding out hope they can land a tackle with some starting experience in the transfer portal.
Yeah, no, I think that, maybe after the spring ball ends and there's another transfer portal window, maybe we see something there. But, overall, I think, we're gonna with the offensive line that we see now is probably what we're gonna see in August at this point, but we'll see. I mean, this offensive line is not an easy unit to kind of, work with by any means, just based off of the lack of development. And I don't want to say lack of talent, but there are a lot of players that are going to need to step up because, when you think about it, and we talked about this before, you know, Corcoran was a 4-star. Benhart was a second overall player in the state of Minnesota in his class. So it's like there is talent there. We just have to, kind of dig for the diamond, so to speak.
And coaching can, it can make a big difference. I mean, we've seen that, numerous times, especially in college football. I mean, college football, especially, I do feel like, having an elite head coach or, a big time head coach is like more than half the battle. Like you could put Nick Saban or like Jim Harbaugh or, Kirby Smart. I mean, you could basically put them anywhere. Like if you put Nick Saban in Lawrence, Kansas, I mean, I realize they were decent last year, but they'd be winning the Big 12 in a few years. Like it just makes such a big difference, having your head coach and having players that believe in that head coach. And I do think that these guys believe in Matt Rule. I do think that, he is not only is Donovan Raiola, continuing their development, but I just think having more guys that are, kind of focused in on that offensive line group will help. But yeah, I do think you're right in the sense that, the guys that are this starting five that's kind of projected, that's probably what it's going to be going into the fall, because I mean, we shouldn't delude ourselves into thinking that like some all-American tackle is going to be in the transfer portal. And if he is in the transfer portal, I don't think Nebraska has the NIL capabilities to land him, frankly. So what you're hoping for is basically, a guy like Hunter Anthony, but just like maybe a better version of that, or but that's what you're looking for, a
I was
guy
gonna
that.
say, I don't know if I want another Hunter Anthony on the line. I just remember him getting blown up by Rutgers. But quite frankly, I'll just say it out loud. We need a better NIL program. I mean, there needs to be some better form of NIL available because what we have right now just isn't seeming to work. And I get, other, recruits choose other schools and winning and stuff like that, but our NIL program hasn't particularly been strong, as of now. That could change, of course, but that's just another piece where I don't think we have a solid NIL program.
Yeah, there's signs. I mean, you can tell like with basketball, we'll see how things go, in NIL with basketball for sure. I know there's obviously Hunter Salas had an in-home visit with, Fred Hoiberg and company this weekend. The kid from Charlotte, I want to say Bryce Williams, if that's not the
Yeah.
name. He visited this weekend, John Hughley's going to be coming in. So we'll see how the NIL deals really do matter, I think, in the transfer portal, especially. I mean, we've seen that in football and basketball. And yeah, it's interesting because on some level, most of the guys that are going to have impacted deals with NIL are top, 100 and 200 guys, which kind of in a sense, Nebraska doesn't recruit a ton of those. Hopefully that'll change going forward. But you do need to have kind of a baseline going forward. It would be nice if Nebraska, I know Michigan's been working on getting like base salaries for all of their players. I think that's something Nebraska should look into, and that's at least something you can say, hey, you could, you're going to get this, and then if you become, a better player like a Trey Palmer, or those guys are going to have, bigger NIL opportunities based on, your performance once you get here too, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think there just needs to be better organization of it too as well. I mean, you talk about just trying to get the word out there, making it known, like the 1890 initiative. Like I see tweets every once in a while, but they have a big following and a big Twitter account, but it's just like, you know, I I just feel like there needs to be something that, you know, something stable that people know, that recruits know, and that players know. And I get players are signed to it, but I've really only seen the 1890 initiative, and even that, I don't hear a ton of news about it. I just see the names being signed.
Yeah, we'll see too. I'm interested with Keisei Tominaga, how that's going to play out if Nebraska can put together, kind of an attractive enough NIL package with passive income to, get him back. I mean, I feel like I've said this before. If he wants to play in the NBA, Nebraska is the best path for that. But, they do need to offer that NIL pitch too. So hopefully they can figure that out. That would be a big addition. But
When do you
um,
think a decision will be made on that front, the Casey front?
well, the draft, I want to say the draft deadline or to kind of submit your name for the NBA draft, I want to say it goes till like May or something. It's kind of a
I was
late
gonna say the
deadline.
middle of May, but
Yeah, and then I think you have another month after that to withdraw, which I think is what he's going to do. I mean, don't panic if you see Casey say he's declaring for the draft. That's actually a good sign for Nebraska because he's not going to get picked this year. But it gives him a chance to get evaluated by like scouts, and that's the smart thing to do. If you're a college basketball
yeah.
player, like you should just declare every single year because you get feedback, you get a chance to play. If you show good enough skills, you can go play in the G League camp, like Hunter Dickinson did that a couple years ago and then went back to Michigan. So it's a positive thing overall. And so if Casey does do that, that's a big win for Nebraska. It would have to be, I would think, in the next few weeks, at
Yeah, I
least
was
by
gonna
the
say
middle
the
of May.
middle of May, yeah, the middle of
Yeah.
May, and then because I know the combine is in May as well, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I think near the end of May. Or
And
May, it
then
might even be the first part of June.
yeah, somewhere because I know it's a couple weeks before the draft, and then the draft is usually like the third or like the last week in June.
Yeah, it's a really extended calendar, especially like for college basketball, and you're trying to, if you have one of these guys and you're trying to wait to see like what they're going to do, it can be difficult if you're trying to, land a transfer portal guy to, take his spot. But if, because a lot of guys are really 50-50. I mean, if you're going to be like a first round pick, it's most of the time they go because you get like a 3-year guaranteed deal. But after that, it's pretty much open season. And so yeah, it will be interesting, but I if I had to make a prediction right now, I would guess that Tominaga will be back next season. That's just hopefully I'm not wrong, but that's how I'm leaning right now.
I would think so too, because I mean, last season was the first real season where he was able to get a ton of highlight tape, and so I could see him coming back for one more year, strengthening the tape as if it's not a good tape already, and then declaring for the draft. I just think after an up and down year in 2021, 2022, and then really exploding in 2022 and 2023, having another year of good tape will really help, make his stock go up if he came back to Nebraska.
Yeah, because he does a lot of things, really well. He's not just a shooter. I mean, he needs to, add some strength, and my biggest concern about him in the NBA is who's he going to guard. How is he? He's not going to probably be a starter or somebody that plays like a ton of minutes, but if you can find a way to just, I mean, he does get steals and things on defense, so he does kind of have that quickness. He's great cutting without the ball. And he's actually one of the better finishers at the rim too. If you look at his statistics, he does a great job of finishing at the rim, which a lot of that is his cuts too. But I mean, any way you can put points on the board, and he can shoot it from all over the place. But that obviously that's my big concern. That was kind of the big concern with him last year. It's like, well, who's Casey going to guard? Because he needs to improve in that area. But at the same time, his offensive game is transcendent at times, so it's worth it.
Yeah, and I was gonna say it's becoming harder to play defense in the NBA with all the fouls. So, I mean, you see some of these high scoring games, and it's just like, do they even play defense? So I think he can kind of get away with that with a good coach and a good scheme, because a lot of times the coaches can hide guys who don't play defense well. So honestly, his point production and his ability to move without the basketball and get open looks is worth a defensive liability. I mean, teams are always looking for shooters. I know up here in Boston, Sam Hauser was, kind of an afterthought. Celtics signed him out of Virginia, I think it was, and he's provided some valuable minutes just as a shooter off the bench. So, um, you know, there teams want shooters. There is a place for shooters in the game, and you can be one dimensional in today's NBA if you can knock down your 3-point shots. So, I think he'd be able to find a home, meaning Casey.
Yeah, teams are always looking, for athletes and all the, but you can't replicate elite shooting. I mean, that's just like Duncan Robinson was a guy he played at
Yep.
Michigan, terrible defense but great shooter. So and he got himself a lot of money. And yeah, that's if you can shoot and make, I mean, even contested 3 pointers, and give spacing on the floor and stuff like that, and do all the other things
Nick
that
Stauskas.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I definitely think he could be, Casey could be a potential second round draft pick. And it would be fun to see him kind of have the offense and be the number one guy in the offense for a full season. Because it was pretty fun to watch him work at the end of last year. He does need a point guard and a big man to kind of help feed him the ball. And it really worked having Derek Walker in the high post, because man, he could just cut, and Derek Walker was great at finding him. So I don't know if they're going to replicate that aspect of it, but it will be fun. It would be fun if it does happen to see him as the number one option for a full season.
And you know what? It would give Fred Hoiberg another recent player in the NBA. Bryce McGowan's is tearing things up right now. So I forget. I know he had a good game the other day. I'll have to look up the stats once I turn it over to you. But he's been making the most of his time with the Hornets. Great to see, because that's another guy. Maybe not the best defender, but boy, he can initiate contact, get to the line, shoot it a little bit. And there were questions if he came out too early, but he's proving that he can hang with the big boys. So that's awesome to see. And then Isaiah Roby, I know you tweeted about this the other day. He signed with the New York Knicks on what, a 7-day contract.
They said he's signing actually for the rest of the season and for next year too. So
Good,
he actually got a good amount of money, I think.
good to see him still floating around and making an impact, because he was one of my favorite players to watch at Nebraska, just because he could rebound and he had a nice mid range shot. So I mean, Nebraska can put guys in the NBA. It's just about, I guess, putting it all together. I guess it's like
Yeah.
the Frost era football teams where, he put guys in the NFL. There were guys that went to the league. It just never never translated on the field as a whole.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see too because Roby's on the Knicks now, and they're in the playoffs. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see him in the playoffs a little bit. But
Yeah, yeah, that'd be
yeah,
neat.
it has been fun to watch McGowan's. And man, I just think like, oh, if he had been on this team this year, although you maybe not wouldn't have got Sam Greasel. So it all works out how it works out. But it was
I
a good
think
decision
Greasel
for
was a
him to
better
go.
fit for this team.
Yeah.
And, McGowan could score, but I felt like he played a lot of isolation basketball at times. So I think for how this offense wanted to run this year, I think Greasel might have been the better fit.
So really quick, I guess before we wrap up, we should touch on the transfer portal since we've been talking some hoop. We talked about it a little bit, but Fred had it, the in-home visit with Hunter Salas, who I'm still really hoping will come to Nebraska. I think that would be a great fit, but that might be a question of the NIL game, because West Virginia was able to get, that point guard from Arizona with the big NIL deal, Kerr Krisha, 650K or something. So I don't know if things can change, but
It's a
I do
nice
feel
amount of
like
money.
it is, and I feel like Hunter Salas would be a great fit, but I'm not. I think people are just need to be realistic. I mean, he's a guy. I don't think he's going to come in here and score like 15 points a game next year or anything like that. I think he would start. I think he would be a really great defender on the wing, and I do think that he can score. Better than what he showed. At Gonzaga, but you have to be realistic about it too.
Quite honestly, Fred needs these guys because if we strike out completely in the transfer portal, it might be Fred's already on borrowed time, and if he doesn't land any of these like impactful transfer portal guys, then it's not looking good for him. Honestly, Salas would be great. I believe it was yesterday they did an in-home visit. Am I right? With
Yeah,
coach and assistant coach Nate Losner. So I don't know. Just from looking at it from a Fred point of view, like they need to land somebody, or else Fred is officially getting the axe.
Yeah, they need two. I think they need two guards, a point guard, and then like a combo guard, a wing, and then a big at least. They need somebody that they can throw the ball to in the post to score. And I'm hoping that's going to be Hughley of Pittsburgh. I know he's got baggage, but
Yeah.
he can be. 2 years ago, I mean, he scored 14 a game in the ACC, so he can do that in the Big Ten if he can do that in that
At
conference.
this point, as long as he keeps his nose clean at
Yeah,
Nebraska and does everything he's supposed to do, I don't care if he has baggage. I mean, just look at Arkansas. They offered literally 84 players
yeah.
in the transfer portal. So let's just get those offers out, see what sticks, and because this is a huge year for this program. And I think if Fred doesn't do anything next year, then Trev has no reason to keep him. Honestly, just bring in your own basketball coach as the athletic director. We already saw it with football. Cut the ties, and get a new basketball coach underway. But I'm hoping Fred can really turn things around because I remember you writing about it back in the day, how excited everybody was, and kind of like Scott Frost. And, so far the results have been a little bit rocky.
Yeah, I feel okay right now about where they're I feel like they've got some good targets on the board. I really like the guy that visited this weekend, Bryce Williams. He's just a unique guy. He's 6'7", his recruiting profile listed him a power forward. He's a guard. So I feel like he was like a combo wing, can play 3-4 for Nebraska. He shoots really well, but he didn't even start at Charlotte. So I feel like if Fred's like, hey, we need you to come off the bench. Like, I don't feel like that's going to be a big issue for him. If he knows he's going to have that role, obviously coming off the bench. And just they need another versatile guy with some size in the front court because they were kind of a small team last year and they got away with it a little bit because Sam was so tall at the point guard position, so they can move him up and you would notice him guarding people's threes at times, and that's not going to work this year if you got a 6'1" point guard and then you're trying to play Jamarcus Lawrence and Casey. That's why that lineup worked with all three of those guys. That's not going to work this year unless we magically get a 6'6" point guard in the transfer portal. I don't think that's going to happen. So that's why I would like to see some more depth added on the wing.
And when you think about it, it's crazy how the starting lineup played so few games together. What could have been? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
for
just
sure.
just another case of the injury bug. And but I don't know. It's a big year for the basketball program next year. So
And I do like Gary coming back, but that's another reason I'd like a guy like Bryce Williams. I just feel like you don't want to put too much pressure on him coming right off the injury, and you don't want to play him too much, and it might take him a minute to kind of find his form again. So, But yeah, if they people you can check out, I did an article about the ideal transfer portal haul for Nebraska, and I really feel like if they get those guys, which I feel like are all semi-realistic, I'm not throwing out like crazy names or anything. I feel like if they get those guys, I really feel like this team's going to play postseason basketball next year. That's my prediction. That's my thought. So
Yeah, and they need to. Quite honestly, they need to. There's the football program
it,
started fresh,
yeah,
and
he at least
you know,
needs a winning record. I think again, I think a losing season would definitely put Trev in a
hey,
position where he has to make a decision. You know,
and quite honestly, an easy decision because prior to last year, he had all losing records. So I
yeah.
don't know how hard the decision would be if he had another one.
I think it would depend, like if they're like 14 and 15, but I mean, I think if they have certain wins, I think you would probably look at it, but yeah, it's not going to be, you can't be going 5 years without playing in
If
the
they're like 20
postseason.
and 14, then absolutely come back. If you're like again like 16 and 17 or whatever, then there's no reason to keep you.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out this year. And I'm glued into the transfer portal. I'm, refreshing my phone, probably like everybody else, trying to see what's going to happen. And hopefully, this kind of a bit of a dead period here for these next few days. I think until through the 10th. So we'll see if that leads to any other decisions. But it might be outside of commitments. There might not be as much news because coaches have to take a pause a little bit. But hopefully, we'll get some commitment soon, and then. Before to wrap it up here as well, we should say Nebraska baseball got a big win, a series win over Michigan, won an extra innings on Saturday, dominated 11-3 on Sunday. So that's putting them right in the mix in the Big Ten race. So good to see that out of the Huskers.
A little bit hot and cold this year, but they are staying in the race, so that's all you can ask for. And I'd just like to see them get a few more winning streaks together and against teams they should beat. So
Yeah, they're going to have some chances to do that going forward. And right now, I feel like they're going to be in the mix in the Big Ten title race. So hopefully that proves to be the case. And we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode, folks. So make sure that you guys, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, get into the comment section, let us know what you think about the transfer portal and Nebraska's, recent recruiting efforts or Dylan Raiola or whatever else you want us to talk about. We'll plan to have another episode this week. And you also should check out our interview from this past weekend with 2024 commitment Gibson Pyle. It was a really great interview. Got a chance to know him a little bit
great
better.
guy,
So,
yeah.
yeah, a great guy that Nebraska fans should be excited about. So check that out. And also make sure you guys are going over to huskerbigred.com. So we will have constant updates there, and we'll have another episode out this week. So as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.